I'd like to call the meeting of Tuesday, November 12th of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Our first order of business is to select a chair pro tem to preside over this meeting from the members present. I will open it up for discussion, and then we will call for nominations.
I move to nominate Commissioner Farina Dawood.
My second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Yay. To get the names who made the motion to and second. Yes.
First was Commissioner Parrott, and second was Mary Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes 5-0.
Next item on our agenda is public comments. City Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
No, we do not.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next item. It's item 3A, approval of the minutes for October 8th, 2024. Does anyone have any corrections?
Move to pass.
Second.
It passes. Let's see, where's the controller? Thank you.
Want to take the vote?
Three. No.
Can we do a hand vote? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to item 4A, consideration of and action on a recommendation for the proposed amendments to Chapter 2 and Chapter 4 of the Land Development Code to the members of City Council establishing an industrial sign overlay district, ISOD-90A, for certain restricted light industrial zone and rezoning light industrial district M-1 to light industrial district M-1, industrial sign overlay district ISOD-90A, properties directly abutting the railroad right-of-way along US Highway 90 between Derry Ashford Road East and Eldridge Parkway West, and adding development regulations applicable to the ISOD-90A district to the members of City Council.
Good evening,
Evening.
Madam Chair and Commissioners. I apologize, Commissioner Smith. The camera is directly in my line of sight, so I will try to lean over from time to time so I can speak with you too, ma'am. So to give you a background again on this, this came out of an existing local business that proposed a plan to redesign their sign. Despite the sign being shorter in height, it did not conform to our regulations. So with that, staff looked at the area again for its specific characteristics and opportunities to create an overlay district. That was then passed by Resolution 2453 by the City Council, directing staff to establish that overlay district. Staff has initiated the development code amendments. Oh, thank you, sir. The development code amendments and then rezoning for the property. This applies only to properties that are zoned M1 that are abutting the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way from Eldridge to Derry Ashford. We do not have any proposed use changes with this. It's strictly just an overlay district that is going to be established in Chapter 2 in zoning, known as ISOD-90A. The regulations for the overlay district will be housed in Chapter 4, the sign regulations, and we are going to rezone those properties from M1 to M1 with the overlay district on the same properties. That overlay district will extend 200 feet in width from the property line with Union Pacific North. The current regulations right now only permit a 6-foot tall monument sign in height with a 60 square foot effective area. This is the map showing the 200 feet in width from Derry Ashford to Eldridge over the M1 zone properties only. Since the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we've made some changes to the overlay district for the maximum effective sign area, number of monument signs allowed, and addressed the sign lighting. I do apologize ahead of time. You're going to see 150 square feet of maximum effective sign area. That should be 200. There was also a typo that you would have in the staff report, so apologies ahead of time from that. So the maximum effective sign area has changed from what was proposed prior to 100 square feet to 200 square feet. And that was so we had that greater visibility. There was a lot of discussion about we having that greater setback to it and wanting to be able to have those businesses have a presence on 90A. We went back, retooled, and we think that 200 square feet would provide that greater visibility. We also had some questions about the number of signs that were going to be permitted on site. We've said that's a maximum of 2 monument signs, and I'll get into a little bit of those details. And then looking at some of the lighting so we don't have any nuisance or any additional light pollution. Oh, sorry, went too far. So this is a chart of the changes of what you'll see in Chapter 4, with that maximum effective area being 200 square feet, the maximum height proposed at 35 feet, which hasn't changed, the setbacks have not changed, and then also the number that are allowed per frontage. So currently, the way the proposal is before you is that 1 is allowed per 500 feet of frontage. The example of that would be at 1,000 feet of frontage, you would have 2 signs. If you have 3,000 feet of frontage, you still will have 2 signs. So at no point will you have anything more than a maximum of 2 of these signs. We also added in here the D for the table, which states that this sections 4-24C2A and 2-24C6A do not apply. These regulations talked about additional monument signage that is permitted if you have one, let's say, on premise or off premise. An example would be is that you could have an additional monument sign as long as it was 125 feet from another monument sign on premise. With this specific overlay district, we only want those two, regardless of how large your frontage is. If your frontage is 5,000 feet long, we're only going to give that allowance for two. So in order that we don't have too many signs. I know that in the past, that when this commission has made recommendations and city council has provided action on changes to signs, the give has always been for something bigger, we have the less number of signs. We also added in here in D that no uplighting or downlighting of the signs are permitted. So these are gonna have to be internally lit. We realize that at 35 feet that sometimes these can be greater in height than some freestanding light fixtures. And while we have full cutoff features for those freestanding light fixtures and regulations for it, we don't want that to become a nuisance in our city. As I had talked about previously about the maximum sign effective area going from 100 square feet to 200 square feet and providing that visibility on the corridor. Last time we were with the commission, some commissioners had questioned about the effective area of a sign. This is not a code that sometimes you guys generally live in, so I wanted to bring this back to you so you all had a greater understanding of that. So the effective area of the sign is measured for the overall sign. So you can see I'll use the pointer here. The sign itself, and then those lines extend down through the base of the sign. So essentially on this exhibit that we have here in that squarish shape is what's going to give you the maximum effective area of the sign. So put a little schematic together that shows you a sign that's 29 feet in height. It has about 6.8 feet in width, and this has a maximum sign effective area of not 135 square feet, but 197 square feet. Again, I'm sorry about that typo. So what you're looking at as a sign effective area is going to be this, because it extends through the base of the sign. So give or take, this base might be slightly smaller. It looks like it is. I don't know the measurements for that. So you could have something like slightly smaller than 197 square feet, but that's how we would look at the effective area of the sign. In contrast, what you can see is that is the maximum that we would allow, but you could have a message that's just 4.5 by 2 3/4 feet, where you have just about 12 feet or 13 square feet of the actual message that's on there. So this just kind of gives you some variabilities of playing with the height and with the width. So if you recall from last meeting, we didn't put like a maximum width or a minimum width on what that sign should be. So that should allow the sign designers to be able to accommodate different size signs. Maybe we might have a business that has a particular logo or a trademark or something on there that maybe is not just sign lettering, that they can accommodate that sign to meet the parameters of what they need in the business district. We didn't change anything with the maximum height of 35 feet, but we did prohibit and only allow only 2 of those monument signs. This is to give you some information on what we have that's already out there. So these are signs that are over on Dairy Ashford. These are the Sugar Land Business Park signs. The one to your right, that monument tall is 40 feet in height, to kind of give you a view of what that would look like. The one that you're seeing on the left, this portion of the monument here that goes tall is 22 feet in height. Again, so if you've driven past this location, that gives you a sense and feel for what that is. It's probably not hitting the setback away from the railroad. Those look like they're a little close comparatively to what we're proposing in the overlay district, but it gives you a feel for what that sign height will look like. These are the existing signs that we have right now that are on M1 zone property and in the proposed overlay district. We only have two monument signs. One is off of 90A, so this is 90A in the distance, and it's industrial. The address is 104 Industrial. It's a conglomeration of different businesses. This looks like it appears to be approximately 6 feet in height. The other is one that is on Schlumberger Drive, I believe, and then 90A, and this is the Schlumberger sign, and that one reaches to a height of 31 feet. To give you some information on how those heights translate for buildings, in the B2 zoning district, this is not, we have a permitted height of up to 100 feet for buildings, and that's only if it's not within a proximity of residential and requires a CUP. In M1, we look at height when we are adjacent or near a residential district, and then from that point, we start doing a one-to-one step setback. So for every foot you would go over 24 feet, that's a foot it has to step back on the height of the building. This is not adjacent to residential, so we wouldn't perceive having any limitations with the height. It's an industrial district. Industrial uses sometimes require taller buildings in height. We looked at the sign lighting with no uplighting or downlighting permitted. This is just a sign. This is not in Sugar Land. I don't think we have any that are obnoxious in Sugar Land that I could show you. But this one shows you where you have like that uplighting that's on the sign. This is an example of something that we would not permit. And now that I'm thinking of it, I probably should have shown you this picture with a big X over it. Not permitted. This is not what we're looking for. So the proposed overlay that's before you is in alignment with the goals and policies of the land use plan, Goal 4B and Goal 9. Points that we'd like for you to consider when making a recommendation on the district is that it does align with the land use plan goals. It does support the M1 zone properties than those that have the greater frontages that abut the railroad and having that increased visibility compared to a 6-foot tall monument sign. The overlay district is going to support the businesses by encouraging the establishments to stay and grow and contribute to our local revenue and our job creation. And those businesses are going to be more likely to invest and expand in these areas where they feel supported by city's policies and regulations that we have been brought before you. Tonight, we ask that you make a recommendation of approval to the mayor and the city council for the development code amendment and the rezoning. The next steps in this process is we will hold a public hearing on November 19th with the city council, where they will also have a consideration of the ordinance. From last meeting that we had where this item was tabled, we did have a public hearing that was scheduled with council. That did not happen, and it was canceled. So this has not been brought before council for any sort of information or hearing besides the resolution. I am here if you have any questions for me. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
So opening for discussion. Do we want to go in a line? Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. I do have a couple questions. I'm guessing from the background on this came up from a business that basically has a sign that's not in, does not conform to the current signage requirements within Sugar Land, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay, within their redesign, it sounded like they did come up with something shorter, but is it shorter now than the 35, or now can they go to 35 feet?
It's shorter than 35 feet, so they could go up to 35 feet.
So what was the reasoning as to why things needed to be higher? If this individual said, hey, I can redesign to whatever foot height that he had, must have been over 10 feet.
Yes, ma'am. Because we were looking overall, I think we had talked about like the overlay being like a first step in looking at some of these businesses. So just because a business had a sign at a certain height, we wanted to look at other possibilities with it being taller. not just for the sake of being taller, but if something else came in for that. I do think that at some point, if we're down the road and we think maybe, we need to have some tweaks done to this, we'd probably bring that back to you. Internally, we are discussing other properties that we talked about on 90A in the feeder road that aren't necessarily zoned M1. So this is the first step in a process. So in that next process, or if it's a year from now, we think we need to make adjustments. It's a living document, and we'd like to bring that to
Yeah,
you.
so what you're saying, which was one of my other questions, by opening up this door with an overlay, sorry,
Okay.
it does then allow for businesses now to come and say, hey, I want a big sign, so further down 90. So we could end up with a 90 corridor with these large monument signs every 500 feet or so, all along down the 90 corridor. Is that correct?
Yes and no.
Well, I know not all of it is classified as industrial, but this will lead into hopefully what we get at some point around Imperial. I mean, this would be the entry, one of the main entry roads, if you will, into Imperial.
I think when it applies to the industrial zone properties and properties that are in the business park or just being used industrially, I think that it makes sense to have that taller sign because of the setbacks that we're experiencing. Internally, for other properties, like whether they're zone B1 or BO, adjacent to the railroad, we haven't had those conversations yet about what it looks like for something that would be taller. I think we have a better understanding of on the south side of 90A, where we don't have that barrier for the railroad, of maybe there should be a little bit of a taller sign. 35 feet, 30 feet, I can say no, that wouldn't be it. It's just not the nature and the feel of what those businesses are doing, but why should businesses on 90A that are the same speed limit as those on the feeder road get a shorter sign when I can have a taller sign on the feeder road? It doesn't quite make much sense.
But I think even some of them that are on the feeder road, it's still 10 feet, correct?
Yes, and I'm not,
It's
I
not
guess.
30, I mean, they're not like billboard size
No, yes,
signage.
I want to be clear that if there is anything that is outside of industrial and outside of the setback from that railroad right away, you're not going to see a recommendation from staff for a sign that tall in height. I think it's because the nature of the larger properties and the businesses with the more intense uses is why we're providing that to you.
Yeah, I can understand the signage that's currently there around going into a business park, but I'm concerned that if we allow an individual business to start wanting this type of signage, that it opens a door across Sugar Land where businesses say, well, this is what I need in order to, continue my business, which I'm not quite sure why signage would be a big thing for redevelopment. I can understand usages, that's clear. But I'm just having a hard time connecting the dots when a particular business wants to come in and have this huge sign that's, almost the size of a billboard.
So that's one thing you all probably don't get to hear a lot about, only until we sort of bring these amendments to you for the sign code. But it's things that we hear day in and day out, on a staff level, because they're approved administratively. I wouldn't say necessarily that everybody's looking for a bigger sign or something, that tall in height, but sometimes there can be challenges, especially if, we've got like a logo involved with it. Some of that is on the POAs that we have that, but we have heard from some businesses about trying to have a little bit more flexibility within the sign code. And for us, looking at that and wanting to keep our businesses, our good businesses that we have in here, and then also getting new businesses in the city, we're trying to listen to those business owners, but within reason,
Yeah.
right? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater type thing.
So within this space, you're saying like every 500 feet, about how many feet are we talking about in this?
Honestly, going back and looking at the measurements, it's within the overlay district, it's 3 properties, and one of those is, the city is included in it on the city's property with Public Works and Animal Services. So this applies to, I believe, the property that is 104 Industrial, and then also Schlumberger's property.
So you
I
could end
think.
up with potentially 4 large monument signs in that space? Or more?
I think maybe only, I think, and please, I'm not entirely sure on the 104 Industrial. It might only be 1, but potentially, and let me go back to the map and I'll kind of show you what that would
it's
look like with 4.
Yeah.
So this is Schlumberger from here to, I think, about here. And then there's some business, like, I think 2 different parcels that are here, or maybe to here. And one of these, actually, it might be here, I'm sorry. One of these definitely has over 500 linear feet. And I apologize, I don't remember now off the top of my head because it's been a few weeks. And then this, I don't know, I think they've got a ridiculous amount here. So on this property, you could have 2 and 1, I think, over here. So this is the city's property. The city can put up kind of whatever they want there. So you could see something like that. But so yeah, you could potentially see 4 from, I would say, maybe here to here. Because I believe it was the Schlumberger had the largest frontage, followed by the city. I think the city had about 800 feet. And then this property right here. I might have included it in the staff report, but I have slept since then.
So what you're saying is basically there's like only within that space 3 businesses. That's what you're,
Yes, because
More or less.
last time that was a question that, came up about like what businesses
Yeah.
this could apply to. So I went back and I do think I followed up in the report with it. I apologize, I didn't cover it here in the presentation, but yeah.
yeah, I think it was probably maybe a little bit misunderstanding last time because I think what you're saying is that each business could do it as long, they could have 2 as long as they have a 500 square foot or 500 feet in front of them.
They would have to have, a business can have 2 if they have like 1,000 square feet. I'm sorry, it's 1,000 feet. So 501, the next one, another 501. So Schlumberger's property can have 2. The city couldn't if we wanted to put 1. We could only put 1 because I think we're under 1,000. And then this one, I think it's 500, maybe 500 and some change. So you could do 1. So now that I'm talking it out loud, you could have potentially 4 from here to here.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I do. Actually, I can wait. Randall or Sapna? Okay. So you said the tallest would be 35 feet. Is that what we're doing?
For the monument sign, yes, ma'am.
And so I have a question. Schlumberger has the longest frontage, and they already have a sign which exceeds 40 feet, right?
It's 31 feet, I believe.
31 feet, okay.
Approximately.
So what happens if, and it's just an example, what happens if they decide that they want to put 2 more signs? The existing, will you be measuring from the existing one, which is now at 31 feet? Would you consider that as already being in place, or they could get 2 more?
We would consider that as they already have a sign, even though it may be, non-conforming with the regulations that we have. We consider that 1, so they could have 1 other if they continue to use that sign.
Or they could replace it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so maximum of 2 for the track that Schlumberger has.
2.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
1 is existing, and there could be 1 or a replacement.
Yes, ma'am.
And then city can have 1, and then there's another property that qualifies to have 1.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, no further question. Does anybody have a follow-up question? So motion to recommend approval to the mayor and city council. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, okay.
Motion to approve what?
Motion to approve, motion to recommend approval to the mayor and city council of, and I have to read the whole paragraph. Consideration of and.
Not reading that, just your motion to recommend approval for the proposed amendment.
Yeah, motion to recommend approval to the mayor and city council for the recommended overlay district, sign overlay district. And the second was by approval.
Yeah.
Can I clarify? It's an amendment and then also it's a rezoning.
Amendment and. Okay.
Rezoning. Yes, ma'am. It's a lot.
Yeah, but I was going to.
Okay. One more time. Motion to recommend approval to the mayor and city council for the proposed amendments to Chapter 2 and Chapter 4 of the Land Development Code, establishing an industrial sign overlay district for restricted light industrial zone and rezoning light industrial district M1, industrial sign overlay district ISOD-90A for properties directly abutting the railroad right-of-way along US 90 between Dairy Ashwood and Eldridge Parkway. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And adding development regulations applicable to the ISOD-98 district to the members of city council and mayor. Second again.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 5A, Planning and Zoning Commission's liaison report for City Council meeting held on October 15th, 2024 and November 5th, 2024. Do we have anyone here that attended that meeting?
I have the October meeting.
Okay.
One item out of the October 15th meeting relating back to P&Z is that there was approval of the residential proximity CUP allowing for a place of worship at 13310 Alston Road. And I think that was one that came, I don't know, it's probably been about a couple months ago now, a while back. But it was approved by council with considerable conversation.
And do we have anyone that attended November 5th meeting?
Yes, I did, and there wasn't anything for the commission.
Item 5B, city staff report.
Thank you. We're looking to prepare items for your December meeting. Just as a reminder, because this is November, we only have one meeting of the commission due to the Thanksgiving holiday. So we will finalize and determine if we have a December meeting for you, and we'll communicate that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Having no further items on the agenda, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. We're adjourned.